Welcome in, everybody. Glad you are here. This is part of the HR Lunch Bunch series from HR Answers. My name is Deborah Jeffries, and I am so glad you are here. We are talking about the invisible second job. I really want to know how many of you have a second, a third, and a fourth job. So, welcome in. This is the first Wednesday of the month, and if that is true and it's noontime, that means it is HR Lunch Bunch. Again, as introduced, my name is Deborah Jeffries. I serve as kind of your host, and sometimes I have a guest, and that is true today. I have my information here. If you have any questions, by all means, reach out. But today we are joined by Jean Hansen. She is an organizational consultant and leadership coach, and we've actually had the opportunity to get to know each other over this last year. And she works for an organization, actually, she owns the organization, Pathways in Life. And when we got chatting, we were talking about kind of one of her big hot topics, which is that of caregiving. And those of us in the workplace, those of us of a certain age, and I don't know that you necessarily have to be of a certain age because caregiving spans quite the spectrum. But what a topic it is for us inside the workplace, for those of us in HR, thinking about one, kind of employee benefits, but when we think about the employee life cycle, when we think about what employees really need, when we think about the health and well being of our employees and what they're going through, and how our managers and supervisors need to be able to support them, that really was kind of the goal of our conversation. And so, truly, this is intended to be a conversation. If I have first timers here, welcome, welcome. We're glad that you are here. But the goal is to have a discussion. Is this a topic that you guys are talking about or discussing in your workplaces? Are you having some success or challenges? Have you been asking questions in this space? Are there things that are working, things you've tried and they're not working? To be able to share and network and learn from each other. So, yes, we have an expert. Yes, she has a PowerPoint. Yes, she'll make that available to you. Yes, we're recording the program if you want to come back and listen again, or if you want to share with people in your workplace post program, or you want to let people know, hey, this is something that might be of benefit to you, whoever that is. You have options. So those of you who are live and in person, we'll send you the PowerPoint post program. We'll send you a link for the YouTube channel from HR Answers where you can come back and visit this again. Otherwise, guess what? The chat box is open. I'll monitor that. Apparently today, I'm also going to be the advancer of slides. But Jean, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you want to give a little bit more of an introduction, then please, I'm so glad that you're here today. And welcome to HR Lunch Bunch and all the people who are here with us live and in person. And they have their cameras on. Even better, then
Yes.
we get to see their
Yes.
faces, which I am so stoked about. So, Jean, welcome. And let's have a lively, informative discussion about this second job that I know I have.
Yes, I know probably most people on the screen do. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming, especially at lunchtime. And hopefully today's discussion isn't going to feel like something else to add to your plate, but maybe give you some resources that you can take away. And yes, Deborah is correct. This is totally interactive, so we don't need to wait till the end to ask questions. Feel free to pop any in the chat, as well as even come off of your mic and ask questions. But what would actually be helpful for me first, before I sort of introduce myself, is to put in the chat your name, or if your name shows up on your screen, the name of your company and the number of employees that you have in your company, just so I can kind of get a sense of who's on the screen. And while you are doing that, yes, I own my own company, Pathways in Life, and I'm working with organizations and also individual clients to navigate through caregiving. My expertise really is in working with aging parents, and that's my second job. I'm working with my parents, and so that's where a lot of this expertise has come from. And so, seeing some of the, thank you for putting in some of the information in the chat. We have some people who have smaller companies and some who have large. Hopefully, the information that I'm sharing today, or that ideas that people come up with, will be able to fit to companies large and small. And so, with that today, in addition to my sort of my company, what I do, I always tell people that I'm a professional juggler, and not the kind that's juggling knives and balls and those type of things and scarves, but really I have a career, I have a business, I have a family, I have children that are part of my family. I have other expectations, and there's certainly things that I'm doing that I didn't necessarily sign up for. And so I am curious, and there's something on the screen there. I'm curious. I know I am not the only one in this realm here who is a juggler. So put some of the things in the chat that you're juggling, whether you see them on the screen or not, just to kind of give me a sense of what other things are happening in your lives, whether it's work related or not. So people want to pop that in. I have the chat open on my screen. What we're finding, of course, is people are juggling lots of things. And I think probably it feels, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it seems like time doesn't slow down. And, we're doing more and doing more, but we still have that same sort of 24 hours in a day. And so people are volunteer work. Yes, love that. New puppy. Oh my goodness. That's certainly a big responsibility. Household chores, father-in-law care. Yes, I'm seeing a lot of special needs sister. I also have a special needs sister. And so, yeah, a lot of different things. Thank you so much for sharing. And so, a lot of demands. I don't think it's a surprise that so many people are juggling, but the thing that I really wanted to focus on today is you probably are aware, since many of you are sharing that you are doing some caregiving or whether it's aging parents or children, that is sort of that invisible second job. The part about that, though, that we don't necessarily think about is it can feel like two full-time jobs. So, of course, the visible job is the one that we have during the day. The invisible job is that one that we don't necessarily know about with employees unless, they offer to share that information with you. Juggling two full-time jobs can feel like a lot. And so some of you have already shared in the chat that you are caring for an aging parent or an aging family member. And so if next slide, please. So that can look like a parent, it can look like an in-law, it can look like a family member. So specifically, what I want to talk about today is sort of one bucket, but let me tell you what the three sort of buckets of caregiving are that Deborah was referring to. So of course we have the caregivers who are taking care of children. And so I think everybody recognizes what that bucket is. The second bucket are caregivers who are caring for adults who are 18 to 64, who usually have some type of a disability or some type of a healthcare component. And so they're not able necessarily to take care of themselves. So that's the second component. The third one are caregivers of elders or people who are 65 and older who are needing some assistance. And so with your employees, it could look like a parent, it could look like a grandparent, it could be an uncle and aunt or those type of things. And so there's also, I know if I say sandwich generation, put yes in the chat if you are in the sandwich generation and you know what I'm talking about. You're caring not only for your kids, but you're now also caring for an aging family member, whether it's a parent, a grandparent, an aunt and uncle. And so those two buckets, the people in the sandwich generation, that actually makes up almost 50% of those caregivers. And so now you're sort of being stretched on both ends in addition to your job. Today, what I want to really focus on are those people, again, that are working with the aging parents or grandparents, because SHRM actually did a recent study, and 73% of organizations really feel like they understand the challenges that caregivers of children face. So that's a pretty high number who feel like they really understand what those challenges are. It drops down, though, to 50% of organizations understanding the challenges for that second bucket, for those adults 18 to 64. And then less than 50%. So less than 50% of organizations feel comfortable in knowing how to support their employees who are caregiving for aging parents or other aging families. And that's really where my expertise comes in. And so caregiving really is can be unseen and unspoken, but certainly deeply felt. And certainly there's many parts of the second job that we do that doesn't necessarily show up on the job description, but certainly impacts what we're doing. So what I'd like to do kind of in that realm of caregivers, put in the chat if you kind of have an idea of the number of employees that you think might be working with or being a caregiver to aging parents or another aging family member. Just put a number that you think, and again, there's no right or wrong answer, but just so I can get an idea of what you think you might be looking at. And also, I'm also reading some of the other comments in the chat. Oh my goodness. Sweetest lady with dementia. I'm going to come back to the end. I have a great resource for that. Okay, so we have a couple people sharing that there's a few that you know about. Okay, so certainly it's not something that maybe is a surprise, but one of the things, 35% on average. Okay, one of the things that next slide, please, that we'll kind of take a look at is that there's, according to AARP, there's lots of different um, there's lots of different things that you're seeing within your organization. And so there's some things on the slide in terms of how you're seeing it affect your workforce right now. So if you had to take a look at those, tell me and just put in the chat what you think is the number one thing that you're seeing with burnout, or I'm sorry, with the way it's impacting your workforce right now. And if you're not sure, you can put in not sure, or if it's all of the above. But again, just to kind of give me an idea of what you're seeing and what is sort of true for you. Average age of employee base, that's very, very good point. Time off, yes, lots of last minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. Time requests, burnout and performance inconsistency, last minute, yes, lots of last minute. Okay, so that seems to be sort of the number one thing that people are, talking about and stuff. So if we go to the next slide, then I'm going to share some stats with you, and I don't think that any of these will necessarily be surprising, but of course we know caregiving is rising, and actually, SHRM has actually identified it as a challenge in the workforce, and so hopefully more resources and trainings coming available. The important piece to know, and this may or may not be true for you, but a lot of times employees don't disclose that they're a caregiver for their aging parents. So think about when our employees have a baby. I mean, we celebrate and it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a great thing. And everybody knows it's, it's kind of hard to hide that you're having a baby or adopting a child, all of the things. So that's kind of on the one end of the spectrum, but on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of times people don't disclose why they are, or don't disclose that they're caring for an aging parent. And I'd be curious if you would just share in the chat why you think that is, why you think, or what are maybe some of the circumstances that you have seen why some of your employees won't disclose that they're caring for an aging parent or an aging family member. I'll give you just a minute to kind of think about that. And while you are thinking about some of those reasons, there is 49%, less than 50% of employees disclose to their supervisors that they are caring for an aging parent or an aging family member. Yeah, absolutely. We don't celebrate aging the same way we celebrate birth. Not a commonplace. Bring up conversation. Absolutely. We're going to actually talk about some of those conversations a little bit later. Some people sort of, kind of uncomfortable. And I hope that the pendulum is starting to swing a little bit and that we are talking about aging in a much more positive. I mean, let's face it, people are living a lot longer. People are working a lot longer. And so I'm hoping that aging becomes, something that people celebrate a lot more. There's a worry of perception. They're not fully committed to their professional role. That's absolutely true. People wanting to retain their privacy, absolutely. Don't want to burden, discuss, or answer questions. Yeah, and sometimes I think people also feel like they're deemed as not carrying their load, or they don't want to miss out on promotions and other things. And so, next slide, Deborah. And so with that, then about 1 in 4 adults are caregivers. And again, this is sort of across the whole spectrum from those who are caring for children up to those who are caring for aging parents. But about 20 to 40 hours a week. I know in some weeks when I'm caring for my aging parents, it is much, much closer to that 40 hours a week. And, a lot of the people who are caregivers are working full time. So in addition to, their 8 to 10 hours, whatever they're working sort of in that day job, now they have these other responsibilities. And then also comes evenings and then in the weekends. And then we're going to talk at the end sort of what the cost of that is in terms of stress and those type of things. So it's not just the amount of time that we're spending, but there's also a financial cost. On average, caregivers spend about $7,300 out of pocket on expenses. But if you look at the amount of unpaid care, so if all the people putting all of the hours into care for family members, if you look at that and put a value to it, it's $1 trillion annually. So it just shows you the amount of people who are providing this care unpaid. Um, I'm just kind of keeping up with some more things in the chat. Yes, there's also times the need to justify the request for time off for leadership and perception of caring for aging versus young children. And, sometimes when we're caring for children, it's much easier to sort of put it into a box because of childcare. And it's pretty consistent. We know what that looks like, where aging parents, we can get a request right away because the caregiver didn't show up. There's other emergencies that come up. So with that, then, in addition to just sort of the costs that people were looking at from the previous slide, if you are looking at assisted living or nursing home for someone who is aging, the expenses are incredible. Like on the slide right there, it's 74,000 to 130,000, and of course the costs continue to go up. The point here that I really like to point out to people is a lot of times people haven't necessarily planned for or didn't realize how expensive that these expenses were going to be when it got to be the time that they needed them. A lot of people don't have the long-term care insurance, so they don't have that to fall back on. So what does that mean for you and your employees? Well, some of your employees might actually not only be working the second job taking care of somebody, but now they're working another job to try and help with these costs. Other employees maybe aren't putting away for retirement because now they're using that money to help offset some of these costs. A couple other trends that you may or may not be aware of is aging in place has become really popular because it's less expensive than going into assisted living or a nursing home. And also, I think people age in place much better if they're in their homes, but there's a lot of sort of trade-offs to that. But that's certainly something that people are looking to. One of the things, though, that could affect your employees if parents are aging in place, they might opt to go and then live with their parents. So what does that mean to you? It means that they're quitting their jobs, moving to another city or another state so that they can take care of their parents. So there's a kind of an effect with you. And then the other one is, the building of the sort of the mother-in-law models and stuff where people can put something in their where they're living where they can then have their parents move into that, which again is another good option, but there's sort of some trade-offs for that. Now you've got mom and dad or grandparents or aunt and uncle living really close. And so now there's sometimes sort of no boundaries in terms of when your life ends and when theirs begins and stuff. But there is definitely a business impact to all of that. And so some of the things is that we're seeing, next slide, please, is and some of the things that people have already put on in the chat is things like absences, lots of last minute absences, people asking for present. People are present, but they're not really because they're thinking of all the things that they're needing to be doing with parents and appointments and doctor's appointments and medication. Turnover, talked about those kind of briefly, people leaving because they're moving to other places to take care of their parents, but also, and I think this is important for you as HR people to know, sometimes people are leaving to go to another company or another organization because they might have benefits that better support their caregiving needs, even if it means it's not the perfect job that they wanted or the pay is less, but it's just a better fit for where they are right now in their caregiving. And so, those are things. And then the cost to that is that it's on average, next slide, please, about $5,600 of productivity that's lost per caregiver a year. And so that's something that I like to point out as well as, looking at sort of overall annually, billions of dollars. And so the question is, how can we support, what can we put in place to better support those who are caregiving? So what I want to do right now is just take a pause and have you either come off mute and we can have a conversation, or you can put into chat where your organization is already paying for this. You know, what kind of support, what type of policies, benefits do you have in place where you're already helping to support and pay for your employees who are caregivers. And so I'll just pause for a minute and see what kind of information that we get. Yeah, paying for it in dollars, non-dollars, others filling in, certainly, overtime. And so one of the things, as people sort of think about this a little bit more, next slide, please, is with our benefits and the way that our organizations kind of are set up is that we were there we were sort of designed for planned time off that were sort of predictable and sort of back care, providing for those times when we know that there's no school or there's holidays, or if it's family leave, someone's having a baby, there's a really sort of a beginning and the end predictable. There was sort of those known disruptions if you're, leaving for a surgery or whatever. But when you're an employee and you're navigating sort of caregiving, especially for aging parents, and we saw it in the chat earlier, there are definite sudden real-time crises that you're dealing with right now. There's ongoing interruptions, constant sort of high stakes decision making that you're also involved with. I don't know if any of you have, sort of been in a situation where you're trying to figure out what's the next best care option? Is it living at home? Is it going into assisted care? Is it going into um, a nursing home? And all these things, you don't know what they are, but you're having to sort of plan for them. A lot of really high stakes decision making. And so what happens is, next slide, please, with employees, what they're really dealing with is behind the scenes again, because they're not wanting to share with their employers or their supervisors. They're navigating these things, real-time crises. There's constant decision making. There's that invisible emotional load. And so, feel free. I'm going to give you sort of a few examples, but feel free to again come off mic and share or put them in the chat. But kind of can look like this. One of the clients that I work with, we were talking about sort of those interruptions and crises. She woke up at 6 a.m. She has a call from her mom. Her mom just fell. She's not sure. Her mom is like, "Can you call 911?" And she's like, "I can't call 911. You need to call 911." So she's got a meeting in 45 minutes. She's trying to decide, do I drop everything and go to help my mom, or do I do this? So, in the minute she's calling another sibling, they're taking care of it. She just takes a deep breath, gets on screen, runs the meeting. And so she's, trying to figure out where she goes from here. So she logs into work. So she's not necessarily needing to take PTO, but she's certainly having this real-time disruption. And so she's focusing on doing the meeting, but then in the background in her head is all these things running about, is my mom okay? What do I need to sort of be doing next with her? I have another client who, again, is sort of working on, and put in the chat if you're having to sort of deal with some of this with assisted living, insurance, what's the next step, medications, if you're sort of going down that road. These don't necessarily require, I mean, they require time, but they're sort of what I call decision fatigue. You're trying to figure all these things out when you're caring for your parents, in addition to all of the decisions that you're also making sort of in your day job. And so it becomes a lot of just decision fatigue and just feeling like, oh my God, I have to make another decision. And sometimes, unfortunately, those of us who are in caregiving, what do? We sort of appoint ourselves in the family as the one. Like, I'm the one that needs to take care of all these things. And even though I could delegate to another sibling or whatever, I'm taking all of these things on. And so now I've sort of just added, not only am I doing my day job, doing the thing with my parents, now I have this conflict sometimes with siblings in terms of trying to figure out managing care and who's going to do all those things. And those are all the things that sort of happen behind the scenes, which may be then that employee that you don't hear from. It's the one who used to be a high performer, but all of a sudden has kind of slid behind the scenes and they just don't really tell anyone. And part of the reason is because they don't know if they should or if they can, and they're just trying to manage it all. And so, on the screen, we have all of these different skills that your employees are managing. They're coordinating, they're deciding, they're advocating, they're managing, sometimes high stakes emotions. So, would you agree? Just put a yes in the chat if you think that these things on the screen are leadership skills. And so, I don't think it's a surprise that they are. Absolutely yes, yes. So with that, one of the things that I like to try and share with people, and it's sort of my mantra, is let's think of caregiving as leadership because it really is leadership, and we use those leadership skills. The problem sometimes and the challenge sometimes, and I know I get into this sometimes with my parents, is when we become the daughter, we forget about all the skills that we use during our day job, the coordination, the communication, the delegation. We forget those things. And so I'm, trying to tell people use those same leadership skills. Also, you as HR professionals to identify and realize that your employees who are caregivers could, if they're not necessarily in a leadership position, maybe some leadership training might also help them to navigate as a way to support those people who are using those leadership skills to better serve and be a better caretaker. And so I just like to say that caregiving is leadership, but it's not necessarily recognized in that way. So, pause. And what I would like to know now is as we're talking about your employees who are caregivers, how confident are you in the support that you provide them? And just maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm sorry, on a scale of 1 to 5, put in the chat what that looks like. How confident are you in the support that you provide? And if you could then also put in there on the scale of 1 to 5, if there's one thing that you feel that you're either really confident about, that feel that you're doing really well in supporting those employees, or what's one thing that you might need assistance or you would like help with. So scale of 1 to 5 in the chat, and then where you feel that you're really confident and where you could use some help. As people are putting that in and the response to the chosen one, the responsible child. Sometimes it's the oldest, sometimes it is the sibling that's closest to the family members. Absolutely correct. So, so with that, most people on that scale, and I'm sort of seeing that in the chat, are sort of in that 3. They're feeling, somewhat confident, a lot empathy, emotional support, but sort of need exposure to all areas. And so one of the things that we're going to sort of go through, supporting emotional advice, gone through it many times. It does help if you're working for companies that really does put people first, because I mean, let's face it, you can't put it in a box over here. Like, here's my home life, here's my work life. And at 5 o'clock, I move from work, and don't think about home, especially when we're talking about interruptions and stuff. So some of the things then, next slide, please, that we're going to sort of talk about for the rest of the time here is some practical things that hopefully that will be helpful to you. The first place to begin really is you can't necessarily support what you don't see. So if you can do some type of a survey, put a yes in the chat if you do surveys as a way to just get information feedback from your employees. I'm just curious to see how many people do, and it could be any kind of a survey that you do. Okay, few companies doing different types of surveys. So yes. And so, next slide, please. What your survey could look like on the slide, next slide, it's got some questions. And so the survey questions aren't just, are you a caregiver or not? But it could be things like, are you supporting someone outside of your household? And not only outside of your household, but then also are you supporting someone who's maybe living with you? That's again the aging parent, the grandparent, aunt and uncle. What is the impact on your time, focus, energy, and also financially? Is there disruptions? Is are you aware of resources that are available? What's your biggest current challenge? And then I think this one is so key is what support would help the most? So those are a couple of the survey questions that you could ask to give a pretty good idea so that when you take those survey questions along with some sort of anonymous stories that people might share, you get a much better snapshot of what people are dealing with. The second thing that you can do is really to equip managers. I'm curious if you could just put in the chat, do you provide training to your managers just in general around communication? Maybe it's about how you give, good feedback, how you have those uncomfortable conversations. If you already are providing that kind of training, you could just kind of add to it. Give your managers simple language they could talk about, clarifying what to say and what not to say. But I think most important is really normalizing the caregiving discussions. I know earlier somebody said sometimes people aren't comfortable sharing, aren't comfortable having the conversation. But I think if we talk about it more, we normalize it, people will feel more comfortable. Something as simple as, thanks for sharing that. Let's look and see what kind of support that our company does have available to you. But you could also offer training sessions on caregiving challenges and strategies that can kind of balance out caregiving support with also looking at sort of, team fairness, how the whole team can sort of support it. You can develop resources and guides for managers that might include FAQs or some examples on caregiving accommodations. If you already have feedback loops or those type of things in your company, you could establish one that's specific where managers can share, challenges or collaborate on solutions to better support their caregivers. And then also, I don't know if your companies do this or not, but if you already have different types of support groups where, like-minded people can get together and talk about things, you can create one for caregivers, which is a safe place for them to, have peer discussion and share best practices. My dad, about 18 months ago, was in the hospital with sepsis, and I didn't know what sepsis was until we got to that place. And so he was in the hospital for a couple days, and my brother and I were tag teaming. And so I went, and my dad moved from the hospital into what they call the rehab center, which is just the one arm, one of the nursing home. And so I was there, and their family member was there every day because we wanted to make sure that they were doing what they said they were going to do, that my dad was getting the support, because our goal was to keep him in as short as possible. But I'm telling you, if we hadn't have been there, if we hadn't had a family member there every day to advocate, it would have been a very different outcome. And I was amazed at how quickly my father went from being this just incredibly positive person to really sort of depressed. And I mean, and we were there every day sort of cheering him on. So anyway, I share that story because I would have never known that until I went through that situation. So if you've got this place where your employees can get together and talk about those things, it's sort of it normalizes what they're going through. It's like, oh my gosh, Deborah's going through this too. It's not just me, and so we can talk about it. Or, Geneva and I, let's get together for coffee because we're, kind of going through the same thing, and we can support each other and share resources and stuff. So that can be something that you can think about doing with your employees. The next thing that you can do, next slide, is to really look at what's your existing support? So, auditing your EAPs for specifically caregiving resources. So you're going to see some percentages on the slide, and these come from SHRM. They actually did a caregiving research report, and the respondents were people who were specifically working, or they were caregivers who were caregiving for aging family members. 71% said that they would like to have additional navigation for caregiving resources. So that was something that was really important to them, as well as 66% saying that if there was an additional legal or financial guidance that was specific to, caring for aging parents, because that's very different than when if you're resources that you need for children or even just yourself. The next one, managing stress and mental health. 68%. This has become my new soapbox. I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago, and it was on dementia and Alzheimer's in terms of research and how things are going and what we can expect. But the thing that I took away from it was women generally are the caregivers. So 65% or more are women. And what do women do? We neglect taking care of ourselves. And so I call that the me ball, taking care of me. We're always dropping the me ball because we think, oh, I can exercise later. Oh, I can get caught up on my sleep next weekend. It's not important. Nah, I don't need to go out with my friends, because I'll just, do this instead. I'll just eat this granola bar at my desk instead of, getting a really good lunch. What happens is when we keep kicking the me ball down the road, there's a cost to us. And the cost is increased stress. And what does increased stress do? Well, stats are 67% of Alzheimer and dementia patients are women. 1 in 5 of women die of heart disease. And the biggest indicator, the biggest contributors to that are stress. So if we can do things to decrease our stress, and it can be simple as taking a 25-minute walk a day, just taking time out and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. I need to do this for me, because if I don't, I can't be here for my employer. I can't be here for my family. So I'm really focused on getting women to take care of themselves and do those things. So you've got in that poll 68% people who want to be able to manage stress and mental health more. So if we can help them with that, they, can show up better at work, can show up more with their caregiving and stuff. So anyway, I don't share those stats to scare people, but I want people to pay attention because it's so important. So next time that you say, I'm going to skip my workout, don't, don't, because the cost is too great. The last one, improve awareness. This one is really kind of interesting in that people are asking for wanting to have more of these things, and yet they're also like 51% are like, I'm not really sure, or I really don't know what's available. And so it's letting people know, making them aware of what is available to them in these different EAPs. And so it could be campaigns, whether it's a webinar, emails, lunch and learns, just on what caregiving benefits, specifically what caregiving benefits are available. You could incorporate, and maybe you do, but think about incorporating the caregiving benefits into onboarding programs for your new employees. There's also ways, though, that you can support not outside of your EAPs. I don't know if you host different types of, fairs that are, for information in your companies, but consider hosting a caregiving fair where local organizations can come in and showcase their services. And this could be across all of those buckets, childcare, people caring for adults, and aging, and having them come together and so that employees can see all of the different things that are available in their community. This next one's really becoming sort of one of my favorites, where you can partner with online caregiving platforms and apps that really will connect your employees with vetted caregivers. So these are caregivers that have already been vetted, so you can just go and go, oh my gosh, here's some people that I could look to hire. It can offer also caregiving advice or provide tools for managing caregiving responsibilities. So, those sort of become like what I call a tech deck or a tech stack that your employees can use that will reduce their stress, also can then improve attention and help employees stay productive because now they have this place they can go to get this information. I'm happy to sort of give some examples later if you're interested in what some of those might be are. But you've got apps or platforms for HR for your companies, but there's also individual apps for your employees that they can take advantage of. And you could actually, put these in a resource list for your employees so that they know what's available to them. And then also looking at fostering inclusive workplace culture. I'm sure that this is not a surprise, but some workplaces, there's that discomfort and there's a stigma that discourages employees who are caregivers from using essential benefits because they don't want to sort of say, hey, I'm the person that's taking care of my parents because they maybe don't feel like it's being supportive. So if there's ways to sort of build that community of trust and inclusive and encouraging people to seek support, hopefully that will kind of reduce that stigma and also without the fear of, consequences. And then the last sort of suggestion is really just the kind of measuring what matters. If you have that survey and you know what people are dealing with, it kind of helps to look at retention. Like, oh, are we losing people because they're leaving because of these caregiving issues? Or I think people already put in the chat that they know about the absenteeism and the last minute requests for time off and stuff. But then also that employee feedback loop, I think that that's key, and the survey certainly can be one of them. But also consider putting in anonymous reporting channels where employees can share about concerns or barriers, related to caregiving. And so that, it's something that can just give you feedback. And, then hopefully all of these things will create some stability for your workforce over time. Um, you know, this is not something that's going away. One of the things that we're seeing, people are living longer. I know that my parents are 90, they're very healthy. I expect that they're going to probably live to 100. I tell my kids I'm living to 100, and we're seeing people work longer and those type of things. And so one of the things that I like to sort of challenge companies is to be proactive. And where are there places that you can put things in place so that your employees who are caregivers know that they're being supported? And what I'd like to do right now is to kind of open it up and see two things. If people have things that you're doing really well that you'd like to share, because we do want this to be sort of interactive, please share that. Or if you've got questions that Deborah or I can answer, please put those in the chat or come off and ask those as well. Excuse me.
Has this become an initiative at all for any of you? Has this become like a 2026, or we're budgeting or thinking about planning in terms of 2027 as activities? Are you tapping into your EAPs? Because that was something, honestly, Jean, with your slide before you got there, because I honestly did not look at your slides beforehand. So number three, when you said EAPs, I was thinking
Hmm.
about, surveying your questions and asking, what resources are available. Are people tapping in? What are our EAPs offering? Are you inviting them in to share information? Um, what information do they have? Oftentimes there's like a newsletter, or there's a supervisory specific kind of something. Um, if this is all couched into your comment about communication and communication training, if we have well-being kind of initiatives or activities or focuses, maybe a special month that you're dedicating to health and well-being for our employees, this could be under that umbrella, right? Add to
Hmm.
it, and then it depending on if we have any ERGs, employee focus groups of sorts, that then is this something that could be the kind of support group? We don't have to call it that, that there's a
Hmm.
place for people, a safe place for people to talk or ask questions, because I think that people, it can be very overwhelming. What are the resources? And that there are so many needs that our adult children or our parental units might have. And I think that some of it is I don't know how to help, especially like in the beginnings. Even if you think about uh, mental health being part of just well-being of our employees, do supervisors even know what to pay attention to when it comes to someone who's as an individual struggling? Now, can you pay attention to some of those tardinesses, absenteeism, anxiety or stress kinds of things, what's causing it, what to say, what not to say, what questions to ask, being part of that communication. If we're having regular, if supervisors, if HR is supporting it and helping, managers are role modeling it, one would hope, and supervisors are actually doing one-on-one check-in meetings, meaningful check-in meetings. Some of this can
Hmm.
pop up and can be part of a conversation. We can hear from people. We can find out some stuff, and there's your informal kind of survey to find out. But then I don't have to have the answers if I can go to HR or can turn to my EAP, assuming that you have one. But that you don't have to have an EAP if you can find resources on your own. And it's not that you're recommending anything. It's just, please know. Because when you and I started talking, it was like, yeah, I didn't know about that. Oh, that would be good. And just when we started talking, when you start putting things out in the universe, then I heard about a program, got slides, got a recording, and sent it to you. And this is
Hmm.
the sharing the wealth of knowledge and information that's out there to kind of say, hey, because to your point, this is not going away. This is going to become, and mark my words, what is it? June 6th,
May
1251.
6th.
June 6th, May 6th, whatever it is, it's the date, right? This is how messed up my world is. That this is going when we start saying we are going to make things a priority, right? When we start making employees a priority, because I could see this being a recruiting kind of
Hmm.
element. We've got these kinds of benefits or resources or whatnot, so that more and more employees are saying this is an employer of choice in this space because they get the whole employee and everything that we're going through, right? And so being
Yeah.
able to kind of think about that because we talk about childcare, we talk about PTO, we talk about all kinds of stuff. Is this on the list? Do we? And I love your idea about sharing that like during onboarding because you know what?
Hmm.
Life can happen in an instant
Hmm.
to all of us. And it's when we don't know something, and especially even if we were told it, are we going to remember it at the time we need it, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things to your point that's so true too is you may not have kids, but everybody has parents. And so you all of a sudden can be a caregiver and not even thinking that you're going to be because something happens. And, we hear stories all the time where, somebody has an unfortunate incident and now they're, needing care. And so, Kim actually put in the chat that the EAP handbook specifically lists elderly care help, but she doesn't hasn't checked into it. So that's really a good starting place. In fact, one of my sort of closing things is like based on what we've talked about today, like what is one thing that you'll do to take this back? And so if it's, checking your EAPs to see what's there, I think that's a good start. Just looking at one step that you'll take. And if it's something that you're not sure of, if you'd like to know what other platforms are available for you as an organization or your employees, if you want to know what the next step is, the conversations that maybe need to have, auditing your EAPs, how do you put together a survey, sort of a checklist of things. I'm happy to, kind of further the discussion with people if they feel that like they need that. I I'm sort of a geek in that I love to research things and find things and provide the shortcuts and stuff. And so that's kind of the piece that I like to play in this. And so if you're looking for something like that, reach out to me. We can schedule a meeting and do that because I am super passionate about this work because if we can support employees, they're going to show up so much more. And it's not something that you want people to not talk about. We love our parents, we love our grandparents, we love our aunts and uncles, and we want to sort of feel like we're supported and taking care of their whole life, whatever it looks like. And to that point, one of the things that I, again, like I said, I'm a geek. I'd like to research things, but I I think everybody probably knows somebody who's been affected by dementia. And I had the opportunity to actually talk to the author of the book. The book is called How Old Are You Today? The author is Glenna Hecht, Hect. Glenna's mom was diagnosed with dementia when she was like 90. And so it was a journey of like eight or so years. Glenna is an only child. And so she created this game with her mom. How old are you today? And so the book is about the journey that she went through. And the book is a very easy read. I mean, it's only like 170 pages, but I don't know if you can see, but the font is so big you don't even necessarily need your reader glasses to read it and stuff. And I picked it up and I picked it up. But anyway, the story is so great in that it's the twofold. One, it gives you some ideas if you are if you do have a family member with dementia, to sort of talk with them in a different way that you might be able to just have a relationship because it can be a challenging time. The other thing about the book that I love is it really gives you hope. Like I read the book and I was like, oh my gosh, it just gave me hope. And so now when I'm dealing with family members with dementia, I have this whole new sense of just ways that I can connect with them and respect. And I think that that's so important. And I'm actually going to interview her in the next month or so and I'll probably post it on my LinkedIn. So if you're interested in that, just follow me on LinkedIn and do that. But this is the kind of stuff that I love to do, find resources and share it with people and stuff. But so if you're looking for a good resource, this is a book, you can get it off of Amazon. If you still go into the old corner bookstores, Powell's or Barnes and Noble, I'm sure that you can find it there as well. So that really just sort of wraps up what I had to share today. And I do appreciate so much people taking their time to come and learn more about this. And again, reach out if there's anything I can do to provide you to help you in your journey with this.
Oh, Jean, I so appreciate it. I think you've given us some wonderful golden nuggets. And Geneva even put into the chat box the fact that her EAP, I believe you're saying it, maybe it's yours. Maybe you just know that Canopy does this. They have pre-made flyers on a variety of topics. And that's one of the things is that, one of the things I was thinking about as you were kind of going through things is that HR just has so many wonderful opportunities and yet so many responsibilities and things that we
Mhm.
need to take care of that sometimes I just wonder whether or not um, we as an HR department, whether one or many, can reach out to employees with something like this who has a passion around this, who is dealing with this, that this isn't necessarily an HR initiative per se, that maybe you've got an employee that's like, you know what, I could use more information. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Maybe there's another employee, and we can kind of honcho a committee, call it whatever you
Mhm.
want to call it, and that they start doing some homework, helping an extension of the HR department because I can imagine potentially that some of you are like, I really would love to do that. That would be great. And I've got this, and this, and this. And I just keep thinking there's so many things that we collectively could be doing with, for, on behalf of employees that would help and support. We want, we care. We care. There's just not enough hours in the day. There's not enough time to do everything that we would like to do. Where's all the energy coming from? How about if we delegate, but we call it something other than delegate? We ask to see if we've got some people because this is the kind of thing that there are flyers, there are brochures, there are opportunities. We can create our own lunch and learns, and it might start out small, but probably small and mighty. And the people who really have the need at the time, because the time will come for a whole bunch of topics where then people will cycle through and they'll help and support each other again on a variety of topics. So much like your slide here, I usually end our HR lunch bunch is like, what will you start working on? But it doesn't have to be a you. It could just be asking for others and who will you share the information with? Because this is how we carry it forward in some fashion. And truly, I do think you've given us some nice nuggets. I really appreciate the people who are with us today, participating and providing information and ideas as well. The chat box has been very lovely today in terms of thoughts and ideas. And truly, take Jean up on her offer for checking in with her, connecting, scheduling time, sending her an email or get on LinkedIn and connect with her. Because if you have additional questions, I encourage you, right? Or if you didn't already, connect with each other in the chat box because this is a great way to continue that networking opportunity. So, with that said, you can always reach out to me for anything you need. If I don't know it, I promise you, I probably know someone who does. Because when you've been along around as long as I have, the answer is I know people, and I'm always happy to share. With that said, our next meeting will be on June 3rd. And if you're looking at the slides, I have no idea what the topic will be. I am narrowing it down. I have a couple of ideas and suggestions that have come my way, and now it's just a matter of putting the pieces together and then sharing the information. So I would encourage you to follow HR Answers so that you can get the announcements when they come out, because otherwise you won't know what we're going to be talking about. And if you have ideas that would help you in your organization, then by all means, send me a note and let me know. Let's get that added to our docket. Otherwise, we'll call this a done deal for HR Answers Lunch Bunch for the month of May. Yes, I do know it's May. And then um, otherwise, we can sit around and network afterwards, but we will officially call the recording done and in the box. Put a bow on it. Take care, everybody, and have a good rest of the month. Glad you were part of this one. Bye for now.